Okay, I've started recording and I'm going to share my screen and start the presentation. So we'll just go for a big... So thanks for waiting and your patience with me. As I was saying, the Victoria Seed Library is a partnership between the Life Cycles Project Society and the Greater Victoria Public Library. We started in 2014 and it's a really cool partnership. When we started, Life Cycles is the lesser known of the two organizations and was the one who brought the idea to the library. And the library was super keen on the idea and really just insisted that everything we do be free. And Life Cycles was really keen on that too. So we were really pleased to be able to start a project that offered seed and the opportunity to learn about how to share and trade seed, how to save seed. The library offers kind of the space. They provide printing sort of resources. Um, they also support um, communications for our project. And Life Cycles um, does a lot of the coordination of the seed library. We kind of keep the seeds secure. We host the seed swap tables and host online events and things like this, and before COVID, in-person events. I'll talk a bit more about kind of what the seed library is, but it's important to say that it's this growing partnership between these two organizations. Life Cycles offers a lot of other great community food programming, and if you're interested in learning more about some of their great projects, I recommend checking out their website. It's really good, clear description of all of the great work of this small local nonprofit organization. So the Victoria Seed Library is a collection of seeds that we host usually at the library. We have over 200 varieties of locally grown seed. What we have in the collection is primarily self-pollinating and easy to save varieties. So these are seeds that are kind of the beginner seeds mostly. We do have some other stuff in the collection too. And I'll talk more about what that means in the presentation. The bulk of the seeds we have are vegetables, but we have a growing collection of herbs, flowers, and native plants. We just got a really great donation of a lot of different flower seeds. So those are just coming into the collection in the next couple of weeks. And we already have a number of really interesting flowers and also a growing collection of indigenous plants. Yeah, and it's a locally adapted collection of rare and useful seeds. And as members now, you're attending this presentation, you are now members of the seed library and are entitled to borrow seeds from us. So we host seed swap tables at the library where you can come as a member and sign seed out from us. And we try to host these seed swap tables usually on a weekend day. It tends to be on a Saturday for a few hours. This year we're only doing 12 to 2. In the past we've done it for slightly longer. In the past, we've done it every Saturday. With COVID, we're doing it every other Saturday. And you can see the dates where you can come to the library and get seeds from us. With COVID, we've kind of started a bit of a different system now. So we ask members who are interested in signing seed out from us, we ask you to send us an email and kind of give us your order of seeds so that we can pre-package your seeds and get them all ready. And then you can pick them up either at our seed swap table at the library, which is being hosted on the dates shown on the screen here, or alternatively, you can come and pick them up from Life Cycle's office. And we have sort of a contactless drop box outside of the office where people can just come anytime and pick up their seeds from there. So a lot of people have been taking advantage of that this year, where you just email us what seeds you want from our collection and we'll put them outside the office for you and you can come and pick them up. So it's a nice safe way during COVID to share seeds. We also have put together this year some kits. So we have like a beginner gardener kit. We have an early planter kit, a mid-season planter kit, and a late-season planter kit. So those are kind of seeds that are good for early, mid, or late planting. We're getting past kind of the early planting now into mid, I would say. We also have like an indigenous garden kit and a container garden kit, which people can sign out. If you're not super, picky about what seeds you get from our collection, you can just get one of the kits we've put together. There are 200 seeds in our collection, and we asked folks to just sign out 6 seeds per season. We figure 6 seeds is a lot for like an urban backyard. To try to save seed from 6 varietals is quite a bit of seed saving. So that's why we've capped the number at 6. If you have a big space and you think you can save seed from more than 6 varieties, you can usually twist your arm and get a few more varieties. But we do kind of put that soft limit on 6 seeds per member per year. So to borrow seeds, like I've kind of gone through all of this already, you can view our catalog at the Lifecycles website, lifecyclesproject.ca, and then just go to the Seed Library Project page, and then send me an email at vicseedlibrary@lifecyclesproject, and I'll send out an email with all of these details and links after this presentation to everybody who registered for the presentation, so that you can check out our catalog and sign seeds out. So we sign these out to anybody who's a member. So now that you've attended this orientation, you are a member. That's the only prerequisite, and it's a lifetime membership. So you only have to do this once. You're welcome to come anytime, though, if you want to brush up on your skills. And anybody actually can return seed back to us. And to keep our collection healthy and alive, we certainly need people to be returning seed back to us. To be honest, we get a small portion of the seed that we give out comes back. But because seeds go from 1 to 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000, just a few people saving seed and returning it has allowed us to slowly grow our collection. We haven't had to buy any seed for the last about 4 years. When we started, we were purchasing a bit of seed from local seed savers to get our collection started, but we haven't done that for quite a while, and our collection is always shifting and growing. And if you have friends who are not members, they can return seed too. You can bring seed to us at any of our events, any of our seed swap tables, and there's also a permanent seed drop box at the central branch where you can drop your seeds at anytime through the year. There's this permanent fixture now in the library where seeds can be dropped. And when you're returning seed, we really need to know the name and the variety. So don't just tell us it's a bean or a squash. We need to know what kind of bean or what kind of squash it is if we're going to include it in our collection. And more detail about the seed is always better. You can see at the bottom of the screen here some of the other things that we're interested in learning about your seeds, and really anything you can tell us about it, we're keen to know. In addition to offering seed in the ways I've described, we have a seed steward program. So there's a volunteer steering committee that oversees the Victoria Seed Library, and the steering committee has identified a number of seeds that are in our collection that we want to try to preserve and make sure that they don't just disappear from our collection. These are varieties that are mostly quite rare. We've scanned different databases of what seed is being offered commercially, and found that some of the seeds in our collection are pretty super rare, and want to try to preserve those so that they don't kind of become lost. And so for those people who are interested and have a bit of experience, when we start coming to the end of the seed of those specific varieties in our collection, we ask people to try to grow those varieties out for us and bulk them up to refresh them and keep them healthy in our collection. So for those seeds that we've identified for conservation, we won't just let them disappear from our collection. We keep them and we give them to our seed stewards. So if you're interested in being a seed steward, please contact me and let me know, and I can learn from you what you're interested in growing, and we can get you some seeds to grow for our seed steward program. In addition to all of this seed sharing, the Seed Library also offers ongoing learning. So we host events like this, and we also have a couple of workshops coming up in 2 weeks. We'll be doing a workshop on taking care of the birds and the bees, so sort of making your garden friendly for wildlife. And then in a month after that, we'll be doing a workshop on growing winter vegetables. So if you're interested in those things, you can check out Lifecycle's Facebook page or website has all of the details you'll need, or shoot me an email if you want to do it that way. So that's everything about the Victoria Seed Library. I'll just pause for a moment here to see if anybody has any questions about the Victoria Seed Library. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see the chat. If you're new to Zoom, you can see at the bottom of your screen there's a menu. You can click chat to see. And if anybody's had any questions about how the Victoria Seed Library operates, feel free to pose the questions in the chat box right now. Great, nobody has any questions, so that's that's easy. We'll just move right along. Oh, there we go. There's is there a limit to how many seeds you can swap? One person asks, and I said earlier in the presentation that we limit the number of seeds that people are allowed to sign out from our collection to 6 a year, just thinking that 6 is a lot for growing in an urban backyard. There's no limit to the number of seeds you can return to us. And you can, if you feel like you can grow more than 6 seeds, you can usually twist your arm to get more. So another question, you said we can check seeds out once a year or once a season. You can sign seeds out as often as you want. We offer seeds from usually mid-February to sort of mid to late May for signing out. Um, and so most people just come and get all their seeds out in one go. And in 6 seeds, you can do that. But if you want to kind of get a few seeds in February and get a few seeds in March and a few seeds in May, you can do it that way too. Um, that's no problem. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, and the rest of the presentation here is really about how to save seed effectively, how to save, kind of grow, save, and store seed. So the first part, the first slide, oh, I'm sorry. The first slide is about why save seed, and there are lots of good reasons to save seed. There's a few listed here on the screen. Everybody comes with different reasons to save seed. They're all great reasons. There's no one good one. I like to save seed because it brings me into closer connection with plants and in the plants in my yard. And through seed saving, I've come to appreciate the life cycle of the plants that I grow in my vegetable garden, especially, and in the flowers that I'm saving seed from. It helps me to notice when the plants are starting to flower and when they're sort of shifting in their life cycle. And it also makes me notice more all of the animals that are coming to visit these plants. And it gets me down on my hands and knees and really kind of admiring the plants that I grow and coming into closer relationship with them. So for me, saving seed has been like an experience of coming into closer connection with the plants in my garden. And that's one of the big reasons for me why I love saving seed. As a seed saver, it's important to know the pollination method of your plants. So plants have these kind of broadly two sorts of ways of pollinating, and most wild plants are cross-pollinated, but a lot of vegetables have adapted, and some flowers too, to be relatively self-pollinating. And what that means is that the flowers are completely closed, and pollination happens all inside of a closed flower. So in the top picture here, you see a tomato plant, and tomatoes are all pollinated inside of a flower. So there's very little chance of pollen from one flower getting out of that flower and landing on another flower and pollinating that flower. Cross-pollinating plants pollinate either through insects, so insects will get pollen from one plant and share it with another plant, or they're pollinated by wind. The pollen will just blow off into the wind and blow around and then land on another flower. And so for seed savers, we recommend that you start with self-pollinating plants. And for vegetables, the crops that are self-pollinating are peas, beans, lettuce, tomatoes, and peppers. A lot of herbs are relatively self-pollinating, or there's not a lot of risk of them crossing. Not a big problems with herbs crossing with other varietals, and a lot of flowers too. Some flowers can cross and create slightly different color variations, but usually that's not such a big deal for gardeners. But with vegetables, when you get things crossing, what happens is they hybridize, and so these hybrids kind of behave in a very strange and interesting way. What you end up with is your two original parents pictured here at the top of the screen, and pollen from one parent gets onto a flower of another parent and produces a seed, which is a cross of those two parents. And if you plant that seed, what you have is the first generation hybrid, the F1 hybrid. And so plant breeders will actually develop F1 hybrids because they have all sorts of beneficial traits. And they kind of develop these two parent lines to create a hybrid plant that has a lot of hybrid vigor and that may be able to produce higher yields or to be more disease tolerant in your garden. And so hybrid seeds can be really useful for gardeners, but they're primarily created by plant breeders who have a massive amount of experience in plant genetics and usually work out of universities or for commercial seed companies. hybrids that are produced in our garden, what we call accidental hybrids, they tend to be rather um, unuseful, especially in terms of vegetables. A lot of the hybrids, especially with squashes and things, you end up getting a lot of squashes that are more like gourds or that just aren't as tasty as their sort of parents would have been. And then if you try to save seed from a hybrid, this really interesting thing happens. The next generation of hybrids will be all different. So if you save seed from a hybrid plant and you grow that seed out the next generation, the F2 generation here is going to look all kinds of different ways. So some plants will be big, some may be smaller, some might be a little bit more yellow, others will be darker green. So you have this, all of the genetics of the two parents start to kind of get expressed in all these interesting ways. And so I show you this to demonstrate that if you have seeds that you're saving from stuff um, that isn't self-pollinating, if it's cross-pollinating stuff, it can quite easily create an accidental hybrid, that F1, and uh, and the accidental hybrids are often not good. But also, if you get seed from a seed company that is a hybrid seed and try to save seed from that hybrid, even if you saved it in a correct way and didn't allow it to cross with others, it won't grow what we call true to type. It won't stay the same as its parent plant. It'll express all these different genetics in the second generation. And so for seed savers, what we recommend is that we save seed only from open pollinated plants. And you can see the OP symbol here stands for open pollinated. And what that means is that the plant will grow true to type generation after generation, more or less, so long as it's not allowed to cross with another plant in the same type. So these open pollinated plants are the ones to save seeds from. And for beginners, we recommend that you save seed from stuff that's relatively self pollinating, so that you don't run the risk of it crossing with other plants. So this slide kind of explains that in further detail. um, I'm going to share after this presentation a really handy one-page document, which is a seed saving chart, and it shows all of the vegetables that we commonly grow and the pollination method through which they're pollinated, either self-pollinating, pollinated by insects, or pollinated by wind. And one of the things that's listed in there is the isolation distance. And isolation distance is the distance you have to have that variety from any other varieties in that kind of plant to ensure that it won't cross. And so for things that are pollinated by insects, the isolation distance is usually about 2 kilometers. And for things that are pollinated by wind, it can be up to 10 kilometers of isolation. And so for folks like me who are gardening in an urban yard, that's very, very difficult. You can isolate using other methods, like people use insect netting to isolate their plants from other insects that may be pollinating their plants and ensure that you don't have cross pollination happening. And with squash, you can hand pollinate the early flowers, kind of open them up just before they start to open, and then tie the flowers shut to ensure that bees don't get in there. You got to beat the bees. And so even with squash, which is kind of the easiest cross pollinating crop to save seed from, it's a lot of work and a lot of careful observation. And so what we really strongly recommend is that you only save seed from self-pollinating plants that are open pollinated varieties that aren't hybrids. And when you're looking in your seed catalog, they should list whether something is a hybrid seed or an open pollinated seed. And usually what you see is that F1 designation for a hybrid and the OP designation for open pollinated. So that's about as deep into plant genetics as I like to get in this presentation. I'm just going to pause here and see if anybody has any questions about any of this. Yeah, so somebody was just about to ask about the distance between different tomatoes, for example, and tomatoes tend to be relatively self-pollinating. The potato leaf varieties of tomatoes are a little bit less self-pollinating and will cross a little bit easier, but all the other tomatoes are pretty good. And what they recommend for commercial producers is that you create, I think it's usually about 10 feet of distance between two varietals. 10 feet is a maximal amount for like commercial producers for a lot of these things. And so what I've been told, if for hobbyists like ourselves, is that we can really just make sure that the plants aren't right together, that you don't have like two rows of different varieties of beans that you're trying to save seed. I did grow beans really close together and save seed from them last year, and I did get a little bit of crossing. They were literally climbing on each other. So there was a bit of accidental crossing, and I was able to identify it in the seed. You could see that the seed actually clearly looked like these two different seeds. I had a black bean and sort of a mottled white and red bean, and what I ended up with across was like a white bean that was mottled black. So it was an interesting cross of the two types. And so you can sometimes see that crossing happening. And if you grow your tomatoes or your beans, your self pollinating plants right next to each other, it does happen that there's a bit of crossing, but it's even if they're right on top of each other, not very much crossing happens. And if you space them out just a little bit, put them in separate garden beds in your backyard, usually you don't get a lot of crossing. Does anybody else have any questions about pollination method, hybridization, and sort of those basic things about, I guess it's really plant sex that we need to know as seed savers? Okay, so I'm going to move right along then. I want to share just this. I love showing this slide because it demonstrates how this one common wild mustard, which grows really all over the place, um, has been carefully selected by humans to have all of these different characteristics. So the common wild mustard has been domesticated and selected for all these different things, and it's created broccoli, cabbage, turnips, kohlrabi, cauliflower, kale. So through cultural selection, humans have um, slowly evolved these plants and domesticated them. And I think everybody sort of knows this story of how dogs were domesticated from wolves, and that we have all this interesting diversity of dog breeds now in the world because people wanted dogs for different reasons. But not as many people understand that all of our vegetables have been domesticated in the same way. And there was this massive proliferation that happened a few generations ago where we had a lot of like local seed companies that were developing new varieties that were great for their local conditions and climates. And there's a real proliferation of diversity in the different types of crops that we had available as a human species all across the world. And all these crops were good at growing in different climate conditions and different soils, and they had different tastes and colors and flavors to suit all these different cultural preferences. And with the rise of industrial agriculture and the advent of big machines and chemicals to grow food, seeds have sort of become a technology that has been really manipulated to fit this kind of industrial agriculture that can be grown almost anywhere on planet Earth. And with industrial agriculture, there's been a massive loss of the seed diversity on planet Earth. The World Health Organization estimates that we've lost somewhere between 90 to 95% of the global crop diversity in terms of the diversity of different kinds of domesticated food plants. Um, but one thing that I find encouraging is that through projects like the Seed Library, people can continue to sort of adapt and choose different varieties in their own yard, and we can grow back that diversity. It's not, I mean, the varieties that are lost may be lost forever, but new varieties are always being created through humans selecting for the things that they like. Um, and as we're selecting, I guess, for the things that we like, one thing that's important to know is that in any population of plants, one individual plant does not hold all of the genetic information for that variety. So if we have a whole bunch of Matthew tomatoes, let's say, in our garden, not any one individual tomato has all of the genetic information on that Matthew tomato. So if you only save seed from one plant, even if you save a lot of seed, you're only saving the genetic information of a part of that variety. And what can happen is over time you start to see what's called inbreeding depression. So you have this genetic bottlenecking event where you only save seed from one variety, and then over time, inbreeding depression is essentially what happens to plants is, and this happens to animals too, if there's not enough genetic diversity. they start to just show less vigor. They become less strong, and you can see the below image of corn here, where the plants just kind of become weak and small and less productive. So it's best to try to save seed from as many plants really as you can. And the chart that I've mentioned before that I'm going to share at the end of the presentation, it shows you how many plants is the ideal commercial standard. And with the self-pollinating plants, we don't need nearly as many seed as we do from things that are cross-pollinating. Usually with cross-pollinating plants, they want you to be saving seed from at least 100 plants. Whereas with the self-pollinating plants, it's far fewer. Usually they say 10. But I've talked to quite a few people now doing these presentations who have been saving tomato seeds for, well, not quite a few, but a couple of people who have been saving tomato seeds for over 30 years and a few over 40 years. And they've said they only save seed from one or two plants and they've never seen any issues with their plants. So it's not to say that it's it never save seed from just one plant, but just know that this is a thing that happens, so that if you start to notice that, hey, that tomato I've been growing for a few years, it's just not performing the way that it used to, you could think, oh, maybe it's because of this inbreeding depression thing. Maybe I'm not saving from enough and I need to get some more genetic diversity and try to find some seed from somewhere else to kind of invigorate the genetics of my varietal. And when you're saving seed in your garden, like I was kind of alluding to before, you can be selecting for the characteristics that you like. And one thing that's really cool about seed saving is that plants actually adapt to their place quite quickly. I talked to a farmer once who was skeptical about starting to save seed on the farm, but she started saving some leek seeds, and she was amazed at how quickly the leeks started to produce better after she started saving seed on her own property. She found that the leeks that she was saving performed markedly better. Like they were 20% larger than the seed that she used to get. And she used to get seed from these big companies that mostly get their seed from the east coast of the United States or sometimes as far afield as Europe. And so by saving her own seed, she developed a leek that was much more adapted to her local growing conditions and performed much better on her farm. So just saving seed in your backyard, and I've seen this in my own yard too from saving seed. A lot of the seed that I save and grow in my yard the next year is that it just does the best. But you can also select for taste or for color, and and you just do that by only saving seeds from the plants that you like, and sort of either pulling out, or just not saving seed from the others. And over time, you can turn a variety of lettuce that has a little bit of red. If you only save the ones that are most red, over several generations, you can create a lettuce that's mostly red. Um, so it's kind of an interesting and fun thing that we can do as seed savers. So that's the all I wanted to share, I guess, about growing plants from seed. And the last section of my presentation is all about harvesting seed. Um, so when you're harvesting your seed, the thing to really try to watch for is ripeness. We want to be harvesting ripe seed, and never harvesting seed before it's allowed to fully mature and ripen on the plant. I often think of it in terms of humans growing a baby inside of them. I've just had two young kids, and we want ideally the child to grow inside of its mother's tummy all the way until it's fully sort of mature and at full term. And it's the same for seeds. If babies are born early, they have less chance of surviving when they're out of the womb. They're smaller and they're not quite as strong and sturdy. And seeds are the same way. Sometimes they will survive if we harvest them early, but it's best to let them develop and set fully ripe seed. And as long as the plants are green and putting energy into their seed, that seed is usually still developing. So with our seed crops, there's essentially two different kinds of seed crops. There's dry seeded crops and wet seeded crops. So the dry seeded crops are crops in which seed is born on a dry, papery vessel, like beans or lettuce pictured here are both dry seeded crops. So with dry seeded crops, what we're aiming for ideally is to have the seed completely dry down on the plant. And really, we're looking for the plants to be pretty brittle and brown and looking almost dead. And a good way to tell if the seed is ripe is to to take some and pinch it in your fingers. And if you can't even make a little dent on the seed, if it's just rock hard, then that's great. That's really nice ripe seed. With wet seeded crops, we're harvesting a fleshy fruit. The seed is born inside of a fleshy fruit. And what we want with those crops is a really ripe fruit. So with those tomatoes, if you've got a few tomatoes on your plant that you kind of forgot about and they've gone too far, they're overripe, not going to be as good for anything but maybe making tomato sauce. That's the ideal tomato for seed saving. It's kind of overripe. It's fully ripened and matured on the plant. With the dry seeded crops, you can pick individual seeds with these lettuce off of the plant as they mature. With lettuce, it's tricky because you can kind of tell in this picture a big head of lots of flowers and seeds, and the flowers don't all develop at the same time, and nor do the seeds. So I usually wait until the head of lettuce is about 70, it seems like 70% of the seed on that head is fully mature. And then I just chop the whole plant down and stick it into a brown paper bag or a bucket or something, making sure that everything is nice and dry. And I can store it in there for months, or I can clean the seed right away. But you can harvest a lot of seed in that way by just throwing the whole thing into a vessel and then shaking all the seed out. And you can stomp on really dry seed and try to separate that seed from the chaff. You can also pick off with your hands. And if you're only saving seed for you and a couple of neighbors or friends, then just doing it manually by hand is a fine way to go. So with those dry seeded crops, we're trying to get them when they're really fully dried down. The wet seeded crops want to be nice and fleshy. And if you do it my way, instead of picking off individually, what you end up with is a bag or a bucket full of seed and chaff. And so with the dry seeded crops, it requires a bit of work to kind of stomp and separate the seed from the chaff. Often it's kind of clinging on to whatever was holding onto it. So you've got to step on it or rub it with your hands. Experimentation, I find, is the way to learn how to do this. And you separate the seed from the chaff, and then you can either winnow it by essentially pouring the seed and chaff through some wind using a fan or just a windy day, and the light chaff blows away and the seed falls through into a bucket that you have below, and you just kind of pass the seed through the wind multiple times, and slowly you get just seed in the bucket at the bottom and all the chaff blows away. Sometimes we use screens too. You can see kind of the bottom left picture is a seed screen. So we have a number of different screens at the seed library, different sizes of holes. So you can kind of pick which screen is going to be the best. Sometimes I let the seeds fall through the screen and let everything else collect, or sometimes I have the seeds stop and all this fine chaff falls through the screen. Using different sizes of screen, you can clean your seed. And then with the wet seeded crops, the middle picture here is a picture of tomatoes that have been sort of macerated with their pulp. And what you want to do is blend up essentially the tomatoes. You can just kind of squish them up, but I find it's best to actually put them through a blender. The blender doesn't actually hurt the seeds, but it just chops all the tomato pulp up into small pieces, which makes it easier to clean down the road. And then you just let the tomato sit with its pulp and ferment for about a week, sometimes 3 or 4 days. If it's inside on your kitchen counter, will be fine. I like to put a little piece of plastic saran wrap or something over top of my tomatoes, and sometimes I poke a few holes in there. I find the tomatoes aroma can be kind of gross as it ferments. I don't really like the smell. But the fermentation process is really important for cleaning the tomato seed. I don't know if you ever noticed, but tomato seeds have this kind of gel coating surrounding their seed, and the fermentation process breaks down that gel coating and cleans the seed from that organic material that's surrounding it. It's the only way to get that organic material off the seed. For commercial seed savers, this is standard. You have to ferment your tomatoes. There's lots of great videos online if you if you Google cleaning tomato seed or saving tomato seed. There's lots of good, like 1.5 minute videos that kind of just walk you through the whole process. Essentially, you blend the tomatoes, you let them ferment, and then you pour off all the nasty stuff off the top, and then you pour a bit more water in, you pour off the stuff at the top. The seed always floats to the bottom, and everything else floats to the top. So after pouring more water in and just getting kind of the seed and water in your cup, you then dump the seed into a wire sieve that catches the seed, and then give it a last rinse under the tap, and then knock your seed onto a non-stick surface like a plate or a baking sheet. Don't put it onto something like paper towel, because the seed will stick to the paper towel. You just let the seed air dry out of direct light and make sure it's really nice and dry, rock hard again, and then it's ready to store. So for storing your seed, the most important thing here is to make sure your seed is really dry. Um, and I even if I'm saving seed on really dry days, I like to put the seed out on my table and just let it dry in a really nice dry indoor space for a week or so, and then put it into its final container. Moisture is one of the key determinants for how long a seed will keep. If the seed is wet, it won't keep for very long. If it's nicely dried, then it will keep for quite a while. And then temperature is the other thing. If you get the seed really cold, then it can keep for very, very long time. But for people who are interested in growing the seed again, like I hope we all are, just making sure the seed is nicely dry and then storing it out of direct sunlight. And if you have a place in your house that's a bit cooler, that's a good thing, but it doesn't need to go in the refrigerator or anything. Most seed will keep for quite a few years, just in a closet out of direct light. I have this back room in my house that's not as well insulated as the rest of the house, and we don't heat this room for most of the year, so it's a bit cooler than the rest of the house. It's where I keep my seed. You don't want to put your seed in a place where the temperature is going to fluctuate a lot. So if it's really cold, but then sometimes it's really hot, that can be bad for the seed to go through those sort of temperature swings. You want a sort of a steady temperature. The most important thing is that it's a dry space to store your seed. And people ask what kinds of containers or vessels you can put your seed in. Really, anything that's going to hold the seed will be fine. Seed doesn't is not picky. Plastic, paper, glass, anything else you can imagine will be fine so long as the seed is safe and secure. Record keeping is obviously important, as throughout the whole process of saving seed, it can be easy to lose track of what variety of tomato is this. Um, so making sure you keep good records and keep the records with the seed. I've done a few times where I make the mistake of thinking, oh, I'll remember what kind of bean this is, and then I put the seed in a bucket and I forget about it for a couple weeks, and I come back and I can't remember what variety it is anymore. So always make sure you keep a little label with the seed wherever it is in its sort of life cycle with you, so that you have the record of what variety that is. The final slide here is about germination testing. So with the seed library, we try to germ test all of the seed in our collection. We're coming due for doing another germ test of some of our older seed, but we germ test everything that comes into the collection every year. And it would really help us if members did germ tests themselves of our seeds, so that we don't have to do it as a small volunteer group. It's really easy to do a germination test. You just get a few of the seeds and you get a moist paper towel, and let the paper towel get moist, kind of like a wrung out sponge. Then drop a few seeds on the paper towel, roll them up, put information with the seed on a not a pen that's going to bleed with the water, just like a permanent pen or a pencil, and uh, and then put all of the paper towel into like a plastic bag and let it sit inside for a week, and then open up the paper towel and see how many seeds have sprouted. And if you have 10 seeds in there and 7 of them sprout, then your germination results are that you have 70% sort of germination on that batch of seed. And 70% is our standard for the seed library. We won't admit anything to the collection that germs below 70%. We've decided for a lot of small flower seeds and our native seeds that we don't do germination tests on them because the germ results are so variable. With those crops that we don't find germination testing really works to determine whether it's good seed. But with all of the vegetables and the big flower seeds like nasturtiums and sunflowers, we do kind of require that the seed passes through a germination test. And you don't have to do it as a member, but if you could take the time to do it for the few seeds you're returning to us, it saves us quite a bit of work. Every year we have to germ test. Usually it's a couple hundred varieties of seeds, so you can imagine that it's a task for us on that scale. The last slide, I lied, is this one, and I want to share a sign up form with you all. And I'm gonna, because I was so late to the game here and started this presentation a whole 20 minutes late because I'm an idiot and forgot about this. Um, I'm gonna just say everybody who registered for this workshop is going to become a member. but I'll share the sign up form in an email that I'll send to everybody with the recording of this and the couple of resources I've mentioned in the presentation. And if you have any comments or feedback that you want to offer, there's a space for that in the sign up form. You can provide your comments to me. Yeah, and that's the final slide. I really appreciate folks coming and sticking around for so long. I see on my screen 19 participants, which I'm pretty amazed by. I really, really appreciate the energy that this project has generated. We have now over 800 members, and not everybody is active, but it's really heartening to know that there are people who are interested in getting seeds from us and growing them and trying to save some seed perhaps as well. And we really encourage you to take seeds from us. We have a lot of seeds, and don't be shy if you feel like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to save seed. Maybe this isn't for me. We don't particularly care if you return seed to us. If you can, that's really great. But we really want to just share seed and help people grow and get started growing. And we do have cool seed in our collection. It's really beautiful seed, and a lot of it is really great. If you find you get seed from us and it doesn't germinate or it doesn't do well, we really appreciate if you can tell us that so that we can take it out of the collection or we can test it again. We're a community-run, volunteer mostly run project, and so your feedback is essential for keeping our project healthy. I'll just stop sharing my screen now and see if anybody has any last questions or comments. A few questions here. As I was talking, it seems like people. So one question, will they make seed still as self-pollinating plants indoors? And they should, for sure. So a lot of people think that like tomatoes in a greenhouse need bees in there, and bees nests don't really need, but sometimes they need to get shook a little bit inside, because outside they get blown around in the wind a bunch, and that helps kind of shake the pollen up inside and helps with the pollination. So if you have something inside that's really still, it can affect how much it will be pollinated. So giving it just a little shake when it's flowering can be helpful, but they will, yeah, they will produce seeds and be pollinated, self-pollinating plants when they're grown indoors. And as a comment here, I tried the wet harvest before with cucumbers, but none of my seeds ever fell to the bottom. Is this because they weren't viable, or did I not let them ferment long enough? It's a good question, and with cucumbers, I actually I don't know. I haven't ever really saved cucumber seeds. I'll be honest. So this is not an area that I can comment on knowingly. I've heard that most people don't actually bother with fermenting their cucumbers, but a lot of the commercial guys do. And I think it may be that you have to like separate more manual. No, I don't know. I'm just talking out of my butt, and then I'm going to just be quiet. I'm sorry, I can't help with that question. Does the protective gel around the tomato seed prevent germination? It doesn't prevent germination, and a lot of people I've talked to have said, I never do that with my tomatoes, never had a problem, but it does create issues for disease. The organic material around the seed can rot it and invite different kinds of fungal diseases and others. So it's highly recommended that you do the fermentation. Ziploc bags work great for saving seed in. Doesn't have to be a paper bag. Plastic bags like that actually breathe a little bit. One thing with glass is that glass doesn't breathe, and so if your seed isn't really dry, it can mold quite easily. And paper is best for allowing breathability. Plastic sort of second best, and glass is the worst. Um, so if you are putting stuff in glass or even plastic, make sure it's dry, but otherwise, it's all good. Nice. That's all the questions. Some nice thanks. And if anybody's still there, I again am sincerely apologetic for my extreme tardiness. I'm so sorry. I've never done that before, and I won't do it again. I hope. Thanks everybody for coming. I'm going to call it there. So if you have any other questions, I will share my email. I'll send you all an email. If you didn't register for this event and found it through some strange way, make sure you send me an email so that you can become a member and get all the information. I'll put my email in the chat box just in case there's anybody who is actually interested in that. And then I'm going to sign off. You can all sign out if you want. Oh. There you go. There's my email, vicseedlibrary@lifecyclesproject.ca. Good night, everybody.